The good. The grass is greener. Hi, my name is Sue Shawmans, and wherever you are in the world, welcome to my channel. Thanks for being here. In today's video, I'm going to look at the good of life abroad. This is the first of a series of 3 videos looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly. So today I'll focus on my own experiences, the good experiences that I've had while I've lived abroad. So let's get started. America, the United States of America. I emigrated to America back in 1989. And I lived there for a year. I was there on an educational visa. My experience there was amazing, to say the least. I was hired by Marriott Hotels, who had come over to the UK, which is my homeland, on a recruitment drive, and they were looking for people to work for a year within the hotel. And once the job was offered to me, I just snapped it up and off I went on an aeroplane, and no idea really where I was going or what I was letting myself in for, but it was by far a fantastic experience. And it was the first time that I'd actually lived abroad, relocated abroad, emigrated. Professionally, let's start with profession and connections. My network was actually my work colleagues. Maybe it's something to do with the service industry, the hotel and catering industry, but without that I would have been quite lost. So my work colleagues turned into my friends, they turned into my support network, and actually I called them my family of friends. They even supported me on one occasion when I had an accident at work, and I was hospitalised, came home out cold for 3 days, but they rallied round, they came to visit me with flowers and to check on me and to make sure that everything was okay. What's more, being friends, I socialised with them quite a lot, which was great. We would go out partying, and on one occasion I remember my boss actually saying, "Come with me to Boston, you can experience the Boston Red Sox playing a baseball game," and it was an absolutely amazing experience. So yeah, my work colleagues became my friends, and I'm very grateful of that. And to this day, which is now decades later, I'm still in contact with them. And recently I got an email from one of them to say, Sue, my dad's turning 80 next month. Would you mind kind of digging out some old photographs for us and sending them to me? Because I'm producing a book of his life. Absolutely, I said. So I started scurrying around and looking for photographs. And it was wonderful to actually look at those photographs, and it brought back lots of really positive memories. So I shared those photographs with her, and yeah, it wasn't only her that I'd worked with, but it was actually her father, who was turning 80, who I'd worked with as well. So that was fabulous. And actually from that family, I would often be invited around for dinner while I stayed there. And a good 10 years after leaving the States, I decided to go back, and I visited them for a week on holiday, and we went to various places, including Newport, which is where I actually was living, Newport, Rhode Island, which is where I was living for the year. We went to Boston, and we also went to meet their daughter, who was at the time living in New York. So it was fantastic. Great experience. So now moving on to the work itself, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Again, had some great work colleagues to work with. I embraced the live to work philosophy, which many Americans had, or have, should I say, still have. And there was a pure determination in me to do a good job, because this actually was the first real job, so to speak, that I'd had after graduating in the UK. So I was determined to do a good job. I worked hard, and the great thing, which actually mirrored my value, was that I was recognised and rewarded for that. And towards the end of my time working there, I was awarded Associate, as they call it, which is Employee of the Month, and I was thrilled about that. The other thing while I was there was they had what is called a quality improvement scheme, where you could, as an employee, give ideas to improve the service, the products, the ways of working, etc. And I regularly contributed to that. And what happened in the end, I was contributing so much that they decided to put me on the committee to actually implement these ideas, which was great. I loved that as well. So my experience in the USA in terms of professional, career and network was extremely good. One of the little snippet I'd like to share with you about my time in the USA is about the language. Of course, it's English, but there is American English and then there's British English. And I soon learned that some words had different meanings. And in my book, Think Then Swim, How to Survive Life's Most Stressful Situations When Living Abroad, I share a little bit about that. So let me now read that to you. Despite a common language, there are some slight and often embarrassing differences between British and American English. Pants were trousers, rubbers were condoms, as opposed to erasers, and being pissed meant you were angry, as opposed to being drunk. So that, can catch you out if you're not fully aware. So that's profession, that's connections, that's a bit about language. What about travel? What about exploring? America is such a big country. As mentioned, I was fortunate to live in Newport, Rhode Island, which is, I think it's actually the smallest state in the USA, and it's a coastal state. While I was living in Newport, Rhode Island, I noticed real differences in the seasons. So in the winter, it could be bitterly cold and you could be walking knee deep in snow. And it was a tourist destination, but in the winter, you wouldn't find many tourists there. So it was relatively quiet, but didn't feel isolated. In the summer, it came alive very much with tourists, and you could go to any of the local restaurants and just sit outside on the terrace and enjoy a fresh lobster, which was, I must say, absolutely delicious. Friends and family came to visit, which was great, and often I would hire bikes for us and we would cycle along the coastal route and enjoy the many famous homes like the Breakers on the coastline, which was superb. Aside from Newport, Rhode Island, Boston was nearby. I also visited New York, and at the end of my time I went to visit ex-neighbours who lived in Jamaica. Visited New York in the height of the winter, minus 20 degrees, and went with a colleague. And to be fair, we spent most of the time in cafes. Minus 20 degrees was a bit much. So we would, hop in a cafe every 20 minutes just to warm up again and then explore a bit more of the city. We did manage to get up the Empire State Building, which was phenomenal, seeing the whole view of Manhattan. Boston, I absolutely fell in love with Boston. There was something magical about it. Yes, it's a fairly big city. You can do the 2.5 mile Freedom Trail, taking in lots of the sites like the Boston Tea Party ship, Quincy Market, which had Absolutely scrumptious desserts, and also, of course, the Cheers bar. When my parents came, we went to went to New York State. We travelled through New York State all the way up to Niagara Falls, which was amazing. What I quickly learned when we got to Niagara Falls was I couldn't actually go to Canada because I didn't have my passport with me. All I had was my Rhode Island identity card. Not handy. So yeah, and then as mentioned, also went to Jamaica at the end of the time. It was close enough rather than me having to travel at a later date from the UK. So I went to Jamaica, spent some time with ex-neighbours. I spent a holiday there, and that was just amazing. The markets there. It was the first time I'd actually tasted sweet potato, which of course you can more or less get in the supermarkets now. And yeah, it was just wonderful to see the fresh produce and actually people cooking food on the beaches for sale. That was also a big eye-opener for me. And the other great thing about Jamaica is the beauty of the place, the greenness of the trees, and yeah, the views of the ocean and the sunset setting over the ocean. And one of the other special things about Jamaica is actually not getting a lot of sleep because you have a chorus of insects during the night. That was quite musical, albeit a bit irritating. So that was my experience of America, my very first expat experience, and it was great. So let's now move on to Norway. What are the good experiences that I had while I was living in Norway? I moved to Norway in 2003 to live with my Dutch husband, who was living there at the time. We'd actually met the year before on holiday in Tanzania. And I actually lived in Norway for just over 13 years. When I relocated to Norway, I had no idea really what I was letting myself in for. We'd kind of commuted to see one another for a couple of months, but I made the jump very quickly. I left my home country, I left my family and friends, I sold my home, I literally packed everything up and moved, which was quite a high risk, but it just felt right at the time. In terms of network and profession, before I left, I decided I'm kind of done with the corporate world, and it had always been a dream to start my own business. So that's exactly what I did. And I found over the first couple of years that the best way for me to gain friends was to go to networking groups, which I did. I attended international networking groups. And the people that I came into contact with became very close friends. They became a family of friends, which was fantastic. And a bit like the USA, to this day, I am still in contact with many of them. In fact, only 2 weeks ago, I got a call from one of them who had actually moved on from Norway, and she now lives in Australia. And she just happened to find herself in the Netherlands, which is where I now live. And she said, Susu, I'm here, can we meet up? Absolutely. And it was just amazing to actually see her again after, I think we worked out it was about 15 years since we'd last seen one another. So we had a good catch up and compared notes as to how life was now living abroad in different countries. So my network of friends there was fantastic. It came through international networking groups, the expat bubble, as we often refer to it as. Professionally, as mentioned, I started my own business when I moved to Norway, and a few years afterwards I was introduced into the intercultural arena, and I trained as an intercultural coach. I trained as an intercultural coach. And that work I thoroughly enjoyed. I did it freelance, and it was fantastic to actually work not only with Norwegians who were looking to relocate or be posted elsewhere in the world, but also looking to other internationals who were relocating to Norway, talking through the cultural differences between their homeland and their soon-to-be host country. And this was not only working with singles that were relocating, but also families and couples. So that work I did, which boosted the income for my own business. I then, it was some 10 years later when I actually secured a job back in the corporate world, and there I got a temporary job covering maternity leave, where I was working for an international company, so I could use English rather than Norwegian. Not that mattered, because by then my Norwegian was pretty good, but I was working on an international scale with an organisation that had subsidiary offices around the world, and I was actually working at the head office. Once the lady came back from maternity leave, the business had grown, and I was promoted to global HR manager. So that was also a big win. It was the right time, if you like, to be working in that setting. What I learned while I was working for this company was how important work-life balance is in Norway. You could guarantee that on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, the desks in the office were empty. The Norwegians had gone. They were off in the mountains skiing or hiking. A few of us that were not Norwegian were still hanging around in the office finishing things off, because we were kind of getting used to this work-life balance that felt quite alien to us. So it was a great thing actually to embrace, but it took a bit of time to embrace it. The other thing that came to light was literally the light, because the Norwegians embrace the summer, and why wouldn't they? Because during the winter, the light is much less. So many organisations allowed you to finish or do a working week in the summer that was an hour shorter, but in the winter you made up for that by working an hour longer. And that was a bit of an eye-opener, but very pleasant to embrace the light and the longer days in the summer months. The other thing that really kind of hit me in the face, having worked in British organisations, which was really good, was the approach to egalitarianism. Now, I'm a big believer that as human beings we are equal and we deserve equal opportunities, and that we are, hierarchy is just there to differentiate positions, and that's exactly how it is in Norway. So there was no issue me going and knocking on the chief executive, the managing director's door, and saying, can I just have a chat a minute? I just want to run this idea through you. So there were some real differences in approaches to working within Norway that I embraced. Mostly, as I mentioned, the work-life balance was a bit, okay, I'll get used to this eventually. But these were some really good things about working within Norwegian organisations. The other thing that I did some volunteer work for an international networking group, now called the European Women's Networking Group, which has 24 branches around the world. So there I did some volunteer work, and this really helped me grow my network. not because I didn't know people within the group already, but I was a focal point for people coming into the group. So those were the good points in terms of networking and career while I spent almost 14 years working in Norway. But what about adventure? What about travel? Norway is a very long country. Look at it on the map. You know, I was really shocked when I moved there. In fact, I hadn't known much about Norway at all when I relocated there. But it's a very long country. And from my perspective, out of all the countries that I've visited, and I've visited 30 in fact, Norway is by far the most beautiful. It is absolutely stunning. The fjords, the mountains, the clean air, it's just beyond description. You have to go there to experience it. And in terms of travel, I recall once having a whole map of Norway and actually highlighting on it not only the places that we'd visited, but also the routes that we'd taken. And by the end of the time that we'd been there, we'd been more or less everywhere, with the exception of Tromsø, which is right up in the north and north of there. So we'd done a lot of exploring in Norway, from visiting the famous Preikestolen, which is just outside Stavanger, Skjerag, if you're familiar with that, which is this big rock that sits between two mountain sides, and lots of people jump onto the top of it. I'd rather not share my experience of that. I didn't manage it. I was just a nervous wreck. The beauty, the scenery, the views from tops of mountains is just phenomenal. So we did explore quite a lot of the country, including the Lofoten Islands, which are also up in the north. They are very special as well. Family and friends, as always, as they always do when you live abroad, they came to visit, they were curious, they wanted to see the place. We would take them around Oslo, which is where we lived. But as you also may experience, lots of friends come to visit and they'll do it once, they've seen the experience, they've seen you, and then they move on. And with the exception of family came to visit quite a few times. So there's my take on Norway, my good experiences of living in Norway, and there are many. Next, let's move on to the Netherlands. I moved to the Netherlands, or we, should I say, moved to the Netherlands in 2016, and at the time of recording, been here just short of 10 years. This is the Netherlands is the home country of my husband, and it's actually a country that I fell in love with as a teenager. My parents and I would come here en route to a holidaying in Germany, and I just loved it. I fell in love with the place. So when I met my husband, we were living in Norway, but I was forever nagging him and saying, can we kind of move to the Netherlands at some point? And we did finally. Let's start with profession. What about career? What happened? When I moved here to the Netherlands, I was recovering from the first diagnosis of cancer. So I wasn't ready to get into the workplace. I needed to rest and recover. But what was really interesting was that when I arrived here, I changed my profile on LinkedIn. I was contacted by a number of employers. Susu, we're interested in your credentials, your experience, your qualifications, etc. Can you come for an interview? So it was really interesting to see, because of my international experience and moving to a country that is very much international. There are lots of companies here that have international headquarters, how they zoomed in to my profile and my credentials and were interested in interviewing me. But I chose, however, not to because of the ill health. But what I did do a couple of years later was once again to start my own business. And the great thing about the Netherlands is that starting your own business is really easy to do. And this time round, what I did was I decided, I want to do some career coaching. I'd worked in HR for decades. I'd done my master's degree by this time in international HR, and I'd been doing intercultural training. So I reached out on LinkedIn to other career coaches. In fact, I created a shortlist, but I actually reached out to one person, and within 20 minutes I got an email back. It was just the perfect timing. And to cut a long story short, I ended up working with her and taking over her work, where I became the career and intercultural coach and trainer for a big organisation here who employs people from all over the world. And when they do that, those people often come with partners. So I worked on their partner program, supporting those partners who were coming to the Netherlands, often without work, and attempting to integrate into a country that they'd never experienced before. So my business kind of grew very, very quickly, thanks to the initial contact that I made on LinkedIn. So that was great, and I loved the work that I did because by then I'd got a lot of experience of living abroad and understood the difficulties of integrating and finding work. Plus I could pull on my experience in HR, having been a HR manager, director, recruiter, hiring manager, etc., and being a job seeker. Later on, having studied the language and also sitting the official integration exams here so that I could get Dutch citizenship, I did some volunteer work at the local language school. So I became a teaching assistant, working with a language teacher, working with immigrants and refugees, asylum seekers, and supporting them with learning Dutch. So career-wise, it has been all absolutely good news for me here in the Netherlands. Networking and community here. I've found we actually live out in the countryside in a village, and one of the things that I said originally was I don't want the Dutch to speak English to me. And I made that very, very clear, and I'm glad that I did. So yes, that's difficult in the beginning when you're learning the language, but it enables you to develop your language skills much quicker. Maybe if you live in one of the Randstad cities, The Hague, Rotterdam, Utrecht, Amsterdam, etc., it's more difficult because there are so many internationals and you're tending to use English a lot. But I put a kind of a stake in the ground and said, no, I want to learn the language and learn it as quickly as I can. So people did speak to me in Dutch, and it helped with the development of the language. Plus it helped me to build a better community of people here. And then you could chat with people while you're walking the dog and have just little small talk, etc., with the locals. My main network has come from the work that I do. So in the international community, supporting internationals with their career and also their integration. Next, what about travel? The Netherlands, unlike Norway, is a smaller country, but it is densely populated. In terms of travel here, you can get from the north of the country all the way to the south of the country by train in 4 hours. But there is absolutely lots to see. Yes, in terms of the big cities, you've got the canals, you've got the museums, you've got the beautiful architecture. There is just something really, really special about the Netherlands. Ooh, that's emotional. The architecture is just phenomenal. Maybe because I've got affiliation with water, and you can go to Amsterdam and you see these beautiful buildings, and you've got the reflection of the buildings in the canals right next to it. So it's just stunning. So you've got that in the cities, but when you, she says, looking out the window, when you're in the countryside, you have a different, different opportunity to embrace other differences within the culture. So looking out the window here, it's spring, and all I can see is yellow. Field after field after field of yellow daffodils, just in full bloom. Absolutely stunning. And in a couple of weeks' time, then you'll have the tulips and the hyacinths and more. It's just amazing. Then you've got mile, I still prefer to say mile after mile of beaches, white sandy beaches. Yes, they're man-made beaches, doesn't matter. The dunes are there. That is also really, really special, and we don't live that far from the beach, so it's just amazing to get out there and explore. There's, of course, the windmills, and that's not just the modern windmills, and that's not just the modern windmills, but the really old traditional windmills. They are scattered all over the place in the Netherlands. You've got the cheese markets. We don't live too far from Alkmaar, which is one of the, if not the biggest cheese market in the Netherlands, so that's just really special to see. And then of course you've got the locals clomping along in their clogs, which is fantastic. And of course the Dutch bikes. I remember as a teenager when we came on holiday here, all I kept saying to my parents was, I want one of those sit up and beg bikes. No, you're not having one. So when my husband and I did move here, it was my 50th birthday, he treated me to one of those sit up and beg bikes, and I absolutely love it. In terms of visits, of course, family and friends still want to come and visit you and explore the Netherlands, which they have done on numerous occasions. International friends from Norway, as well as from the UK, and also my family back home who have visited on a regular basis. So there we have it. There was my good experiences of living in the Netherlands. Well, that finishes off this video in terms of my personal good experiences of life abroad, having lived in America, having lived in Norway, and now living in the Netherlands. So that's my take on the good of living in those 3 countries. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you take something positive from it, and if so, please like, comment, share and subscribe. I would really appreciate that, because then it gets the message out to others who are not only living abroad, but also those who are contemplating or are about to embark on a journey of life abroad. These messages are really important. They enable people to really think about what they are letting themselves in for, and not just to look at the good, but also the bad and the ugly, which is going to come in the next videos. So the next video will be focused on my bad experiences of living in those 3 countries, the United States, Norway and the Netherlands. So until then, thanks again for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, as I mentioned, please comment, share, like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Until the next one, take care, have a great day. Bye for now.